Discover how science is transforming diplomacy across Southeast Asia as a service. Join us as we cover the 10th founding anniversary of the ASEAN Science Diplomats Assembly and meet the leaders, scientists, and change makers shaping ASEAN's future through collaboration, resilience, and evidence-based solutions.
Science diplomacy fosters cooperation.
Evidence-based decision-making process and also the public policy processes should be informed by science.
We really want our science not just to be confined in our laboratories. We want our science to be used and to benefit the lives of our people.
We are now open for business. From climate change and food insecurity to pandemic, artificial intelligence, and regional cooperation, today's biggest challenges no longer stop at national borders. And in Southeast Asia, a new generation of leaders believes science may hold the key not only to innovation, but to diplomacy, resilience, and peace. For the past decade, the ASEAN Science Diplomats Assembly has been bringing together scientists, policymakers, business leaders, and diplomats to transform research into real-world solutions for the region. Born in the Philippines and now recognized across Asia, this growing movement proves that science is no longer confined to laboratories. It is now shaping economies, strengthening communities, and redefining the future of ASEAN. In this episode, we take you inside the 10th founding anniversary of the ASEAN Science Diplomats Assembly here in Alabang as we meet the visionaries, change makers, and future leaders bridging divides and inspiring lives through science diplomacy.
The main goal of ASEAN Science Diplomacy this year, if you look at our team, it's about bridging divides and inspiring lives. Since it's our 10th founding anniversary, we still want to continue our advocacy, and that is to reach out to all our scientists and engineers in Southeast Asia on how science is going to be used for policy making and decision making. And we want to use science to communicate a lot of stakeholders, specifically to the poorest of the poor. So that has been the challenge of every scientist, right? Sometimes our work is siloed. And one of the missions of being a science diplomat and being part of the science diplomacy program is to reach out all levels of stakeholders, because we really want our science not just to be confined in our laboratories. We want our science to be used and to benefit the lives of our people. It's really very important, specifically because of the ongoing issues nowadays that are happening. So it's not only related to science, but of course, everything that's happening, we need the scientists to provide solutions to climate change, for example, food security, energy, water insufficiency. You will be needing scientists to provide you these technical solutions, right? So it's not just about knowing the policies or knowing some solution, but it has to be based on science. It has to be evidence-based. And that's the purpose why we'll continue this kind of advocacy. For ASEAN, we have developed and we have trained and capacitated more than 100 ASEAN science diplomats. When we say ASEAN science diplomats, these are the outstanding scientists and engineers of Southeast Asia. So, like what I mentioned, they are trained and capacitated on how they're going to solve the global problems, not only in their own countries, but of course, in this ASEAN region. Started in 2010 in the Philippines. In 2016, I was able to replicate that in the whole Southeast Asia. In 2021, in the whole Asian region. And in 2025, last year, I was able to reach out even to the world. So we want them to know that we have our own identity, because there are many science diplomats, but what is the identity of being an ASEAN science diplomat, and what makes us different from any other science diplomacy in any other parts of the world? We have the heart for change, and we don't just use science and we don't just use it to popularize our work, but we use science again to benefit the lives of our people.
I come to your assembly not as a scientist, but really as a peace builder and a development practitioner from Mindanao. And those of you from the Philippines, and I think those of you from Indonesia and Malaysia, know Mindanao as a region that has experienced tremendous conflicts. When I used to think about science, and now science diplomacy, I think of laboratories, powerful computers, but when you think about what you're trying to do, science diploma in ASEAN, we have to think about what's going on at the community levels. So we have to think about science determining whether crops survive because of climate change, whether flood warnings come in time, whether communities are protected from pandemics, and whether misinformation deepens fear and violence, whether evidence actually strengthens trust, because now we are in the age of alternative facts. So diplomacy determines whether nations choose cooperation over fragmentation in addressing shared challenges. And today, I would like to stress 3 points, if I may. First, why human security should be central to science diplomacy, particularly in ASEAN. And second, why women and women peace and security are essential to resilience. And third, why technology and education, especially literacy for mothers and vulnerable communities, must become part of ASEAN's long-term peace and security strategy. When I was growing up, when people talked about security, it was securing the borders of a country. But thank God that over time, security has really been redefined to mean human security. So you're not just protecting state, you're protecting the people who live in the state. And since we're no longer looking at security through military lenses and territorial lenses, we now have to look at the other threats, the non-traditional threats that surround us. And they are so many. Climate change, food insecurity, pandemics, cyber threats, disinformation, water scarcity, forced displacement. And all of this can be impacted by science. And diplomacy is at the core of that. If we're talking about all of the conflicts that we are seeing in ASEAN. None of these threats can be solved by one country alone, and none can be addressed without science. This is why the idea of human security is so important. Human security asks not only how do we protect the state, but even more important, how do we protect our people? Unlike many parts of the world where science and technology are increasingly framed through geopolitical rivalry, ASEAN has the opportunity to shape a more people-centered model. After all, that's one of the pillars of ASEAN, right? People to people. One rooted in solidarity, inclusivity, and shared resilience.
The core question I want you to hold in your minds throughout this presentation is this: how do you transition from being the technical experts who collect data to becoming strategic negotiators who control how that data is used? Okay, so the framework we are using today is something that is very popular and established. It's from the Harvard Program on Negotiations. Okay, this is principled negotiation. This method was developed by Roger Fisher, William Ury, and Bruce Patton in their landmark book, Getting to Yes. There are 4 core focuses of this particular method of principled negotiation. Okay, first, you separate the people from the problem. Just clean your data, right? Separate your personality issues, just look at the data. And then next, second, focus on interests, not position. Okay, so don't think about this is what my country wants, this is where we are. Think about what do we need, what do we want, and what do they want? Why do they say those things, right? It's the why part, it's not the what. And then third, okay, this particular principled negotiation, the third thing is you invent, which you're good at, scientists, right? You invent options for mutual gain. Don't just think about yourselves. Expand. You're smart. Don't just think, this is my subset, this is what I study, this is all I want to see. This is what my data tells me. But then there's another scientist that says, but this is what my data tells me. So why not expand the pie? Make the pie bigger. Think about it. Okay? So think about more options. Okay? So invent options for mutual gain. You have to resist, right? It's very hard to resist your own position, right? So it goes against the grain. No, I want this is for me. No, but expand the pie. So this is this is the third, okay? The third thing that you need to remember about principled negotiation. In order to be a good negotiator, you have to invent options, okay, for mutual gain. Because you want to win, right? You want to get to yes. And the fourth thing, okay, in this particular principled negotiation framework is you have to use this you will like, okay? You insist on objective criteria. Okay, this is what you set. You use scientific benchmarks, international standards, okay, and verifiable data rather than caving in or thinking about political pressures. The other three factors is what you now need to focus on, right? How do you make them say yes? This is something that I think the value that maybe lawyers bring to the table. We like to talk, right? We like to talk and we need to look at different sides because we need to get to yes, right? For whoever we're advocating for. At the Philippine Institute of Arbitrators, we advocate for peacemaking. We advocate for dispute resolution. We advocate for peace and harmony. So to end, what are the key takeaways for science diplomats? Okay? From soft to hard law, right? So this is the conclusion of this session. I want to leave you with two key takeaways that I believe are essential for every science diplomat. The first is the shift from soft law to hard law, right? Historically, ASEAN has preferred to go soft, right? Soft. But we are now going, MOUs, those are non-binding declarations and consensus-based framework. But for many situations, these instruments work well, but for others, they don't. But when it comes to environment, there should be hard lines already. Environment, and when there are ecosystems, okay, permanent damage, that's when it's not acceptable. It has to go hard already. Now, data is evidence. The second takeaway is about the power of data. Your power as scientists who produce the data as evidence for people like us, and policymakers, okay? Empower your policymakers, empower yourselves with the data and with the science.
I'm in the field, of course, of arbitration, commercial arbitration, international commercial arbitration, and also lawyering for corporations, right, who also get involved in disputes across borders. So I think that one thing that is really important is evidence-based decision-making process, and also the public policy processes should be informed by science. Science diplomats, play a part. And they should be heard. Their voices should be heard when it comes to public policy. I think decision makers should make sure that they listen to all stakeholders and especially do not set aside when there is scientific data involved. And of course, when it has to do with safety and also for progressive development, economic development and all, especially given our challenges today. I think that events like these, this opportunity to be, together in these colloquiums and committees within ASEAN, it's great to host them because then our participants can really bridge, the gap between I'm not just talking culturally, but also in terms of policy-wise. We are able to explain to each other the whys, like why did we come up with that policy and how can we work together. So I think that, being ASEAN is becoming stronger now. We're gaining ground in terms of our identity. We're no longer functioning as, we're just one of the countries. No, we are really coming together. I think it's also a matter of time because there's a lot of conflict outside and even internally we can never get away from that. But I think we're seeing what is the advantage of being ASEAN. Because we've seen also how other regional cooperations work, like the EU and also the US. Well, I think that future ASEAN leaders must make sure that they keep touch on the ground, in terms of AI technology, for example, they need to understand it. And there has to be public policy about it. You can't ignore it, okay? Other countries already have rules and laws about it. We don't have it yet. So let's talk about it. And I think they should also be very, not just emotionally, I'm not talking about emotions, but I think culturally sensitive. I think we also need to be more loyal to each other as well. And we should talk about the hard topics and start working together, not just talking about it, but like taking concrete action steps. Innovation is the key to future productivity. We need to replace jobs which are lost because of also advances in technology. And at the same time, innovation is what's going to move us away, make sure that our middle class grows, right? We need technology and innovation in order to create newer economic opportunities for our students, for our young people, as well as how do we industrialize? We have to move away from being the producers of the raw product. We have to manufacture already. And I think we have so many friends, right? We have so many friends who can help us get there. Yeah, and we have to help each other.
As you know, air quality is a transboundary challenge. What happens, say, in Indonesia can be felt in the Philippines, in Malaysia, and vice versa. But with space technology, we're able to monitor this at a regional scale. Our collaboration with the European Union and the European Space Agency on the use of constellation of satellite, the European satellite that takes images globally, particularly in our region, and how the Philippines serves as the regional hub for these Earth observation data. From this one, we develop applications and pilot services such as ground motion monitoring, land cover, forest and crop mapping, and also benthic habitat monitoring. And finally, space situational awareness and space traffic coordination. So you see, right now, space is becoming more accessible, not just to government or states, but also to the private sector. So with that, we see an increasing trend in space activities. And with more space objects or satellite in space, the issue about space governance and the issue on keeping our space asset safe and secure is of paramount importance. And when we talk about security, it's not just in space, but we also talk about what happens on Earth. So every time we do launches, the rockets shed off parts of it, and our region is no stranger to getting this rocket launch debris. By having coordination among countries in the region, sharing information, and eventually developing capability and a network of observation, then we increase our capability to monitor space situational awareness. So at PhilSA, we use the space value chain as our framework. And how do we bring space for the benefit of Filipino people? First, on the upstream side, so we build satellites, that's one. So these are sovereign satellites that we control and operate ourselves, and hence we have direct access to the data from these satellites. But that's not the only source of data. We also optimize the use of other satellites that is available for us. And with that, we get more observation, which we translate to products. So this includes maps and other information that we derive from space. So the question earlier is about how can this be useful, say, in monitoring the effect of our weather, extreme weather events such as flooding, and then maybe the opposite of that, drought. Okay? So these satellite information are precisely giving maps that gives us idea on what's happening on the ground, what's happening on the vegetation, locating where they are, determining the stress condition of the different crops, and also assessing the damages when it is hit, say, for example, by typhoon. So these are just some of the specific examples on how we bring space technology closer to every Filipino. Yeah, science diplomacy is becoming an important strategic security tool for the reason that it fosters cooperation. For space, we say space is international by its nature. Why? Firstly, space is regarded as a province of mankind. Nobody owns space, and we cannot claim sovereignty or ownership of it. No nation can do that. But what that also means is embarking on space mission would also entail, especially the more complex one, international partnership or collaboration. You have seen recently the successful Artemis mission, which actually showcases how the collaboration among different countries are able to contribute to the success of the mission. So we have this saying that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And in space, we reach far, we do more complex missions by doing it together.
Well, ASEAN today faces increasingly interconnected challenges involving food security, nutrition, climate change, and public health. These challenges are further intensified by supply chain disruptions, extreme weather events, and global uncertainties. It is in this context that science diplomacy becomes an important platform for regional cooperation. It allows ASEAN member states to work together beyond borders through scientific collaboration, knowledge exchange, technology sharing, and evidence-based policymaking. First is science in diplomacy, where scientific knowledge informs government policies and regional decision-making. In ASEAN, this can be seen in climate forecasting, food security planning, and disaster risk reduction efforts. Second, diplomacy for science, where regional cooperation enables scientific research and innovation. Examples include joint ASEAN agricultural research initiatives, technology exchange, and collaborative capacity building programs. And lastly, science for diplomacy, where scientific cooperation itself becomes a tool for building trust, solidarity, and stronger regional partnership. Why food systems and nutrition matter in ASEAN? Food security today is no longer only about increasing food production. The conversation has evolved to include nutrition, resilience, sustainability, accessibility, and equity. Across the region, ASEAN countries face interconnected challenges that directly affect food systems and nutritional security. These include the impacts of climate change, and now the Philippines, we're still preparing for the onset of El Nino come this August to September months. Of course, rising food prices now that we are impacted by the ongoing Middle East crisis. Disruptions in supply chains, declining fisheries and biodiversity, as well as rapid urbanization and changing dietary patterns. At the same time, malnutrition and hidden hunger remain major concerns, particularly among vulnerable sectors and low-income communities. Food insecurity is also becoming more visible in urban areas where economic disparities continue to widen. Despite the abundance of food choices in many major cities, access to affordable and nutritious food remains difficult for many households.
We just finished, as you know, the 40th ASEAN Summit in Cebu, chaired by, of course, our President BBM, the chair of ASEAN. The ASEAN leaders present here today, including my Prime Minister, Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim, clearly committed themselves to ensuring that this greater collaboration of unity in the sense of strengthening the ASEAN centrality towards addressing the global challenges, not only in ASEAN, but also globally. As you know, the challenges faced here far transcends our borders when you look at the conflicts, the environmental challenges, and of course the economic challenges that we face. And only together, coming together as countries in ASEAN, the 11 member countries of ASEAN, can we clearly say that we can work together and try to help each other in terms of trying to utilize our best strengths possible in the team. And I think that's a very clear message that the leaders gave during the 40th ASEAN Summit in Cebu. Science, of course, has always been an important pillar of national development. Policies that we put in place ensures that the policy base is based on evidence and research. As you know, this will greater enhance and of course ensure that any policies or any solutions we offer is grounded in this science and diplomacy. We cannot no longer forget that the world is moving at a faster pace, and you look at the changes we have in digitalization, in AI, and of course the new technology advances that is ongoing and continue to go. More often not, countries, especially in the diplomatic world, realizes that we cannot just stop at using conventional ways of addressing issues. It has to be science-based. It has to be evidence-based. So it gives a greater impetus for us to be able to achieve a far greater development, both technologically and of course socially. And I think that is so important. I want to again congratulate ASDA, led by Dr. Glenn Banagus, for the excellent effort and work they have done in bringing together the diplomats, the science diplomats of ASEAN together, and this is very important. Of course, I want to congratulate the Secretary of the ASDA, Dr. Renato, for his role in ensuring that at the ASEAN level, we continue to work together to ensure development. Policies and actions that we do must be mired in evidence-based science, methodological approach to any solutions. If you look at on disaster management, Philippines suffers a great impact from disasters and of course from climate-related phenomena, and so does many countries, including Malaysia also. When you have scientists and of course when you have the leaders of institutions in the various sides of the country discussing about how we address disaster phenomena, science plays a very important part in how we address them. So when we collaborate our knowledge together, both in terms of research, both in terms of findings, both in terms of new technologies, we work together as one team in trying to address it. So I think the current challenges faced by the world, a lot of it are mired in the need for us to use technology and science to further address them. And I think that's where the role of today's conference is so important, to be able to share views, share understandings, share new research ideas and see how we can address them together.
As the ASEAN members, we believe the cooperation is really important for all because no one country can face the challenge. We should working together, and Bayanihan from the Philippines, we believe working together to face the many challenges we can have with another ASEAN members, of course. Science is one of important sectors because without science, we don't know anything. Science is the basic for knowledge. So that's why science diplomat is needed in ASEAN because somebody need to talk about science to the public. So that's why the science diplomat is needed, and all of the scientists should become the science diplomat.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today on evidence-based and ethical policymaking. I approach this topic with humility because public policy is rarely made under perfect conditions. Officials often decide with incomplete information, limited time, competing values, legal constraints, and real consequences for communities. But I also speak with some confidence on one point. Better evidence, better science advice, and better ethical guardrails can improve the quality of public decisions. Today I will share 3 connected stories. First, a story about my own experience on the energy efficiency law and how evidence can move policy into law. Second, the story about dispute resolution and why technical communities should care about how disagreements are prevented and resolved. Third, a story about eggplant or BT Talong and what it teaches us about science, uncertainty, ethics, and public trust. In the 90s, energy efficiency was often understood in very practical terms. The government just motivating people to change their light bulbs. That may sound modest, but many strong policy ideas begin with a familiar problem. People need energy for light, cooling, communication, health services. Businesses need power to operate. Governments need energy to deliver public service. So when demand rises, governments often ask, should we build more power generation facilities? Should we invite private sector to build, import more fuel, or expand transmission? Energy efficiency asks a different question. Before we build more supply, can we reduce waste? Energy efficiency can function like additional supply. When consumers use less electricity for the same service, the energy system can serve more people with the same generation capacity. In a market where electricity demand is often inelastic, this matters. Less waste can reduce pressure on supply, lower demand can help moderate prices, better energy performance can help consumers, utilities, and regulators. For policymakers, the lesson is that not every solution requires a new physical asset. Sometimes the better first step is to use existing resources more intelligently. This is where evidence becomes important. We need data to show whether efficiency produces measurable savings, improve reliability, reduce costs, and support system planning. Without data, energy efficiency can sound like a slogan, but with data, it becomes a policy instrument.
My presentation today will talk about communications and its importance. These are the keys to effective communication. We need a shift from what I would call an information dump, which is complex technical writing, to meaningful conversations that are clear and relevant and memorable. Things that people remember that have an impact on their lives. Focus on a core message. What is your core message? Can you write down the most important thing that is important to your data in 15 words or less? What is the message that you, if you had a chance to convey to a policymaker, what would it be? You have to know your audience. Are you communicating with congressmen who care about certain kinds of things related to their constituencies? Are you communicating with regulators who have other interests? Or are you communicating with the public? Each audience has a particular type of information that they want to hear. It's so often the problem that one message does not fit all. Every audience has a sweet spot for the message to give them. You have to know your audience in order to make an effective pitch. You know, the elements of a communication plan are very simple. It's not hard to make a communication plan. The communication plan is the audience, the message, and the method, A, B, and C. How do you reach the audience? Some audiences you reach with social media. Some audiences you reach with direct mail. Some audiences you reach with a direct presentation face-to-face. But scientists talking to laymen often don't understand each other because the language is different. The language of laymen is about human interests. It's about stories that are memorable. It's about why something would affect them and their families. All of us in the rest of the world that are outside the science community are very proud of the work you do because you're telling us what's possible. But it's communication that bridges that gap. As Dr. Dar pointed out, with agriculture policy, it's true in climate resilience, it's true in water resources, it's true in marine science, it's true in every field. It's the communications gap between the scientists and the policymakers that is really the issue, and together they work.
Alternative dispute resolution serves as a cornerstone of both domestic justice and international stability. By utilizing neutral, non-adversarial processes like negotiation, mediation, and arbitration, among others, we replace war or violent coercion with dialogue and rules-based justice. ADR is deeply rooted in Philippine tradition, dating back to pre-colonial times when village leaders settled conflicts. For example, the indigenous peoples of Bukidnon resolved their disputes through a system called husay, which, if translated to English, is orderliness. However, formal institutionalization began in the 20th century, Republic Act No. 386, or the Civil Code of the Philippines, where compromises or amicable settlement of certain disputes and arbitration are recognized. The Philippines was also one of the first signatories to the New York Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards. Today, The Philippine ADR landscape is anchored by the Alternative Dispute Resolution Act of 2004, or RA 9285. We believe that through ADR, we will declog court dockets, boost investor confidence, and uphold the rule of law. Diplomacy is the art of conducting negotiations and maintaining stable relations without recourse to force. When diplomatic impasses threaten to escalate into conflict, ADR becomes an invaluable tool. In diplomacy, ADR mechanisms allow conflicting states or non-state actors to articulate grievances and interests in a structured, objective environment.
For 10 years, the ASEAN Science Diplomats Assembly has shown that science can do more than innovate, it can unite. In a region facing climate threats, health crises, food insecurity, and rapid technological change, science diplomacy is emerging as a powerful bridge between nations, industries, and communities. What began as a Philippine initiative rooted in service and resilience has now become a regional movement shaping the future of ASEAN cooperation. And as Southeast Asia navigates an increasingly uncertain world, one thing becomes clear: the future will belong not only to nations with resources, but to those willing to collaborate, innovate, and lead together. Because in ASEAN, the next frontier of diplomacy may very well begin with science. Maraming salamat sa isang oras sa pagsama sa amin upang tunghayan ang isang makabuluhang usapan tungo sa pagpapaunlad ng inyong negosyo dito lang sa Open for Business. Hanggang sa susunod na linggo, samahan nyo kaming muli dito sa Open for Business. Catch us on Facebook and YouTube. Like and subscribe on our social media page at Net25TV. We will bring you more insights from industry experts, thought leaders, CEOs, and featured SMEs. Together, let us help encourage business development in the Philippines. Sharpen your business acumen. Feel the pulse and set the trend for as long as you are informed and open for business. Ito po si Cesar Vallejos. Marami pong salamat.